This episode of the podcast is supported by The Athletic, the best place to watch and listen to about football. Does that make sense? A lot of podcasts online. You can get a 7-day free trial to check it out and see if you like it, and 50% off an annual subscription, which works out to be about 8p a day, £2.50 per month. For some of the best writing about football online. Really is worth it. That is www.theathletic.co.uk/Tifo. Anyway, thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Hello, and welcome to the Tifo Football Podcast. I'm Joe Devine, and today I'm joined by Seb Stafford-Bloor. Hello, Seb.
Hello, Joe.
How are you?
I'm very well.
Good.
Thank you very much.
Today's episode is a sensible transfers episode, all about Manchester United. Now, if you are following Tifo across all channels, you might be sort of feel a bit nauseous to know that it's quite a Man United heavy week. This was unintentional. We have a sensible transfers Manchester United video coming out. This is partly because Alex couldn't make the podcast today. So instead, we made a video which has his choices in it. Go and watch that if you want to hear from Alex. Also, with the Bruno Fernandez deal, which I'm sure we can talk more about, happening / not happening, we've also made a video about how Bruno Fernandez might fit in to the Manchester United team were he to actually make a move. So you'll be able to see those on the channel this week, and obviously there's the podcast as well. Seb has located 3 areas. One of those areas is a whole area.
It is. So
all of the midfield. Well, let's go through them first.
A little bit of an asterisk, though. If we don't include a certain area, that's not us saying that area is absolutely fine and doesn't need any attention. Because I think Joe and I had a conversation on, I think, Thursday or Friday, where we just said, right, well, you could probably just change everything.
Everyone.
Yeah. We also, when you do this kind of thing with Man United, it's kind of tempting, I suppose, to go down the 13-year-old on Championship manager route and just, right, I've got £1 billion and I'm going to sign everyone.
Yeah.
But we very deliberately try to avoid that. So I've kind of created my own artificial restraints.
It's also clear that Ed Woodward isn't going to do that.
Probably not. We also, one thing we haven't acknowledged is a little bit of an elephant in the room, which is that we don't really know who's making transfer decisions at Man United, and there probably should be a director of football in situ, which there is not.
Yeah, there were a lot of references over the weekend to this being brought up or announced by the club 18 months ago. Still no action there.
Yeah.
And it seems like every time it becomes a mainstay of the headlines for a few days, the club maybe briefs some journalists saying, oh, it's happening soon, it's going to happen soon, and then it goes quiet again.
Well, there's been an interesting development there. So people who are based outside of the UK won't know who this is probably, but the former Daily Mail journalist Neil Ashton has just recused himself from a Sunday morning panel show called Sunday Supplement on the basis that he's now gone to work for Manchester United. I think presumably he is leaving his column at the Mirror behind as well.
He's in PR, right? Though I mean, that's his new
so it's a little bit nebulous. In fact, I think Neil Ashton's at the Sun now,
right?
Or was. Either way, he's not there anymore.
Uh-huh.
So he's going to take up some kind of PR role, which people have only really heard snippets about. I don't know Neil Ashton, I've not met him. But he is seemingly going to be some kind of new conduit between the club and the journalists, which seems like the easiest step instead of trying to PR badly run organisation would just be to get your organisation to run better.
Right.
In my opinion.
Yeah.
In my opinion. But
maybe they feel they have difficulty explaining some of the bad decisions they make.
Maybe, but I feel like the answer to that isn't to appoint a journalist. I mean,
it's odd.
It's helpful, but it's strange to find such a high-profile journalist. It would be odd, for instance, if we woke up this morning to the news that Henry Winter had gone to work with Manchester City. I would find that quite strange. I would think I'm a great admirer of Henry Winter's abilities, of course, but why does the club need those abilities?
No, I agree. Well, listen, I don't want to early
Henry Winter is not going to work for Manchester City, by the way.
Absolutely not. Although it was Henry Winter who broke the news about Rashford's double stress back fracture, whatever that is. We'll come on to that.
Yeah.
I just want to make it clear at the beginning, this is not going to be an episode of the podcast where we shit all over Manchester United, because there are some things
in parts
that they are
it
doing.
might be.
In parts, it definitely will be in parts. But I want to.
Let's be productive.
Yeah, well, I want to take a sensible look at it as well. And part of what, before we get started with the positions and the picks, right? I want to say, I watched the Liverpool game yesterday. I think the result was right. I don't think Manchester United played that badly. I think it was emblematic of what the team is at the moment. And I think there were good performances. We discussed this beforehand by players like Fred, for example.
I thought he was the best player on the pitch.
He was the best player on the
for
pitch.
about 20 minutes. I thought he was the best player on the pitch in the second half.
Yeah, he recycled the ball so well. He seemed very, very confident. He seemed so much more than the player that we've seen in the past. And we've seen him growing into the role, probably because he's had a long run without any threat of being changed, because all of Manchester United's players are injured or they don't have any. But also Brandon Williams was very good. And I think there are positives, but the positives are tainted by one huge negative, which is that the positives exist in a realm which we would not be considering as positives 10 years ago. And that's, you have to accept that, right?
Yeah, I think that's right. And also, one of the things that struck me, Joe, was I was watching that game, and I thought pretty much exactly what you've just said, that the second half, as bad as the first half was, I thought the second half was an improvement. And I thought, actually, this is quite encouraging, given the injuries they have, given the changes Solskjaer has had to make in his first team, and also, let's not forget, given quite how good Liverpool actually are at the moment, because Liverpool, they're exceptional. The problem is that the subtext to every Manchester United performance is how much money has been spent to get to this point.
Yes.
Because if that was a performance given by, say, for instance, Everton, you'd be like, okay, in fact, that's not a good example, is it? Because they've also spent an absolute fortune. But for a civilian club, a club with a normal budget.
Crystal Palace,
that's a good performance. But then,
in fact, Crystal Palace over the weekend was that sort of performance.
They gave an excellent performance to Man City. Yeah.
And you think, hey,
absolutely. And thank God we never released that podcast where we said all kinds of negative things about Palace.
We never told anyone about that.
Yeah, but then, it can exist in their imagination now. Like, guys, what actually did they say
what
about...
What did they say?
It
was
what kind of
very
person would
poorly
say
timed.
something like, I don't think Jordan Ayew will score a single goal all season. Obviously a mug. Anyone who says something like that. Anyway, it was never released, so it never happened. But obviously, Manchester United can't be dealing in such faint positives is I think, our broader point.
Yes. Well, tell me first the positions on the pitch that you've decided to go with. I know you've chosen the whole of the midfield.
Yeah, so I've tried to rebuild the midfield with a little bit of a spiel beforehand to justify why I'm doing it.
Okay.
I've looked at the wide right attacking position on the basis that there's going to be some kind of 3-man attack. Yeah. Maybe with 2 behind 1 or the other way around.
Currently, Daniel James and Juan Mata from time to time are playing that role, right?
Yeah, and I accept that sort of the use of Marcus Rashford as and when fit and Anthony Martial is a little bit varied at the moment. Solskjaer is sort of shuffling that. So I've tried to find players who could theoretically play in one or more of those roles.
Good.
So we've got that. Midfield. The midfield is part of a bigger conversation because I, in my opinion, it's the root of a lot of Man United's problems. So I've got 3 new midfielders and a couple of sort of gratuitous players who might not fit, but who fit with sort of the overarching philosophy under which I did this.
Yeah.
And then centre half. I've only come up with one centre back because I think Harry Maguire is obviously a long term. Starting player. I know he hasn't started particularly well, but I think he is still fundamentally a good player and someone that you can put in. You can consider a first team player at Man United for probably most of the next decade.
Yes,
and I think Victor Lindelof has improved.
We're yet to see the best of Eric Bailly as well. I feel he suffered an injury.
I don't want to.
He was considered to be very, very exciting prospect, wasn't he?
Absolutely, yeah. His reputation was excellent, and I feel like criticising Bailly is a little bit unfair because he's been a victim of injury. His body has been fragile. But
much like my body.
Like your body, mine too. I walked up the escalator at Angel Station and my knee started creaking.
That is the longest escalator in Europe.
You know when you start walking along the left-hand side and you commit to it, and everybody watches you and you think, I've started, so I've got to get to the top.
Particularly when it's rush hour and there is no option to stand on the right.
Because people behind you and like if you stop,
have to go.
People exhale loudly and become really passive aggressive.
Yes, exactly.
So you have to commit to it.
I mean, I think Eric Bailly would make it up that escalator fine,
But he has
would
just recovered.
survive?
So he's fit and available to play.
He was on the bench for Liverpool,
Exactly.
wasn't he?
So we didn't see him, but we will do soon, presumably. And
Lindelof and Maguire have developed a reasonable partnership as well.
absolutely, I think Lindelof was a bit of a figure fun for a while. But credit to him because he's a young player. He's recovered. He's coped with the criticism, and he's put in a very adequate set of performances this season.
Is he young?
I think he's 24.
Is he really?
Hang on, let me check that.
He looks like such a 28-year-old to me.
Someone who's been 28 for like 4 years or something. Maybe I'm lying. Hang on. 25.
He's 25.
He's 25. He was 25 in July.
Are we allowed to describe him as young? As a defender, he's still on the younger side, isn't he? As a central defender, with what comes along with that.
Yeah.
If he was a midfielder or a striker, you wouldn't be allowed to call him young anymore.
He's young enough so that you could realistically say he might improve a little bit.
Sure.
Therefore, I don't put him in, for instance, the Phil Jones category.
Yeah.
Where you think, no.
No.
Just no.
Just going to get worse.
Yeah. So there's no skull and crossbones next to his name.
Fair enough.
As there might be for Phil Jones. So shall I start with my centre half?
Let's start with centre half. I fear that we've just said they've got three great centre halves, or not great, but they've got three adequate centre halves. Is it the most prominent position to replace? Probably not.
Nope.
But of your three, why did you pick it over the wing backs, over the strikers?
Because I want, as temporary director of football at Manchester United, I want my side to have the ability to rotate into a back three.
Okay.
And whilst we've just said that they have three decent centre halves, you need to have four, really.
Because Luke Shaw, whilst he was okay,
I thought he did well, but he's
not a centre back.
You can't rely on Luke Shaw.
What is funny though is that he played probably his best game of the season in not his position.
Yeah, I feel like that had something. That's a mental description of where Luke Shaw is at the moment.
Maybe that is that. Well, we could probably talk about that. You carry on.
Okay, so the player I've gone for is, on the basis that I'm not looking to spend a fortune here, gone for Freiburg's Robin Koch, who's actually quite similar to in stature to someone like Harry Maguire. Like, I think he's 6'3", 6'4". More importantly, though, good with the ball at his feet. So this will make a little bit more sense when we get to my midfield picks, because I think one of the issues in Man United is they don't quite have enough technique running through the middle of the pitch. Like, a lot of their football seems to rely on counter-attacking phases, which work well sometimes. But I feel like if you're ever to become a front foot side, a side that can actually construct moves when an opponent is sitting behind the ball, you have to be able to do a couple of things. You have to be able to work the ball out of defence and skip through an opponent's press, not just shovel it out to a fullback or bang it long. Mm-hmm. You have to be able to actually penetrate that first layer of an opponent's
Can I jump in and say here as well that I think teams have worked out all they have to do is press Harry Maguire a bit, and that means he can't play the ball over the top of the midfield, which can't transition it itself.
Exactly.
So if you have an additional centre-back option who can make long passes, that helps.
Absolutely that. I mean, this is kind of informed by what I watched Tottenham do with Toby Alderweireld and Jan Vertonghen during their prime, not now, but a couple of years ago. Is the great advantage of having both of them was one was right-footed, one was left-footed, but they were both excellent with the ball at their feet. Like, Alderweireld has probably the best long-range passing in his position in the league, I'd say. And Vertonghen's a really good medium-range passer. So they had the ability when a centre-forward pressed them, or several opposition players pressed them, to move the ball to one side or the other, and then to cut the ball into midfield or long or to a winger. And it makes such a difference. Just in the... It
makes the forwards afraid to press you as well.
Absolutely. It changes the entire tone of a game. And so Robin Koch is not going to... I think I looked him up on Transfermarkt, and he was sort of a £15 million
so for Manchester United then, 65 million, is
probably,
that how it works?
Yeah.
We're going to talk about that with Bruno Fernandez a little bit later as well. That's worth a conversation.
And probably with Harry Maguire as well, because that's another interesting anecdote.
The £80 million man versus the £70 million man.
We could have done it 6 weeks earlier. Robin Koch's 23, so he's at a very pliable age. Freiburg not having the very best season, but at the same time, I still like his profile as a player. As we should have the disclaimer that this analytics element of this podcast is done by Alex. I very deliberately haven't tried to clash with his approach to things. So if you want to see a kind of a a more statistics-based pick, I suggest having a look at his video.
He focuses on progressive midfielders and a new left back.
So, yeah, he's my one pick there. I don't think it's a priority. It's just an additional squad player because I think it's I think if you had any other injuries, so for instance, if you wanted to play a back three, that makes you reliant on Eric Bailly's fitness, not a position I really want to be in. I think you need to have that supplementary player, someone who doesn't come in with a big reputation, a big budget. So that rules out all kinds of other alternatives. You need someone that most people haven't heard of, who can come in and quietly sort of assimilate into the formation if you need him to. Potentially, he could even grow to supplant Victor Lindelof in a two-man back four, but a useful addition.
I like it. I agree. You need 4, don't you?
Yeah, and it's also the profile aspect of this is important. You cannot go out and spend another £50 million on a player like that because he's a squad player. He's a backup, someone who can just adjust gently to English football. Let's
have it now. Then it feels like we need to have that conversation now.
Yeah.
About Bruno Fernandez, not specifically about how he would fit in the team or anything. Can I start by saying, I mean, the issue is there's been some conflicting reporting on it. A lot of reports last week were suggesting that it was already done and that both clubs were satisfied with their evaluations of the player. Some conflicting reporting, particularly from the Telegraph, I think, which I would trust, says that the clubs are actually quite a distance away in their reflections.
That's the kind of my latest understanding too. Like the ones I've read, like all the sources I trust. So the BBC carried that report. Laurie Whitwell at The Athletic? Yeah. I think he confirmed the same over the weekend. So unless something changes between now and when this pod was released, it seems there's
and they're saying they're about 20-25 million euros apart in their valuation. The reason that Manchester United are frustrated about this, according to the reports, is because the player was available in the summer for transfer to Tottenham for the price they are now offering.
Yeah.
And the fact that he's gone up 25 million euros over 6 months is a slightly odd thing. Presumably it is predicated basically solely on the fact that it is now Man United.
It's a Man United tax.
It's a Man United tax, right? And so I do actually have some sympathy for Ed Woodward. I never thought I would say that, but I do have sympathy for him because this is not, in the way I can understand it, this is not just about this one signing, despite the fact that it is vital at this point of the season, depending on what your goals are, right?
Yeah.
If you have any aim to finish in the top 4, they have to sign midfielders. That's just a given. Right?
Completely agree. Yeah.
But this also continues a precedent which has been worryingly set and increased over the last 5 years. And I think if Ed Woodward or Manchester United ever want to be taken seriously in the transfer window, they can't just cough it up always. And if that means not signing Bruno Fernandez because a club are trying to extort them an additional like almost 50% of his value, like a 50% Man United tax. That's insane. It would make me want to walk away. It really would. And given that there is no proof really that the player is going to be or that he's made out to be, it's so much money to spend on someone. It not only, as I said, perpetuates that Manchester United tax, which is just going to happen the next time the club are in this situation. It also puts a lot of pressure on the player. It puts a lot of pressure on the club, and it will continue to the downward kind of Dante's Inferno spiral of Manchester United's recruitment of players is terrible. Yeah. Why? Because they spend so much money and they get nothing. Well, maybe that's something to do with the tax.
Creates a negative perception right from the start.
So perhaps the best thing to do is actually not to buy Bruno Fernandez and suck it up for 6 months, not finish in the top 4. I don't know. A finance expert would tell you that is definitely not the right thing to do.
I feel like there's a bit of a chicken and egg situation here in that I agree with everything you said. Like I don't think Manchester United should just be coughing up. I feel like this is a legacy of all the business they've done in the past though. And it's kind of not just with what they've paid for which players, but also the way Manchester United carry themselves socially. So unfortunately, the club have got into this habit of being quite loud about their commercial power, and Richard Arnold, one of their directors, sort of is a little bit of a comedy figure with the press because he's always saying very clumsy things, talking about Manchester United being the world's greatest soap opera, and there are also quite a few unhelpful quotes knocking about from Woodward where he's sort of saying, well, first team performance doesn't really impact commercial performance. And he's like,
Which, given that
you can
Liverpool
think
are
that
about
if you
to
like.
overtake,
Yeah.
clearly is not true.
I don't think that makes you look very smart.
No.
So Man United, they've been a little bit brash, and I feel like I agree with you completely. I don't think that justifies paying a tax on on players who I'm not quite sure what the basis is for Bruno Fernandez's worth. Like I think he's a good player, but I don't have enough context around him to really think. Yeah, so if you pay 60 million pounds or euros for a player from Juventus, for instance, or maybe even Paris Saint-Germain, Barcelona, Real Madrid, Atletico, those kind of clubs, Bayern Munich, then you have the context of knowing what it is for a player to operate within a squad at an apex predator club.
All we have is the ELO rankings, which actually in Alex's video about Bruno Fernandez, due to be released tomorrow, I think, Wednesday this week, he finds a comparison between Sporting. I think they have the same ELO ranking as a club like Southampton, mid to lower half of the Premier League.
Okay.
So the best way of, I suppose, or the way I'm trying to imagine it in my head, it's a bit like buying a player like Jack Grealish, for example, without the addition of him being homegrown and without the sort of, I suppose, part of the hype around him from here, but an outstanding standout player in a lower half Premier League club. How much does that cost you? Maybe it does cost 60 million euros, but if it didn't in the summer, I think that's the thing they are.
Yeah, well, I agree. Also, how does this player adapt to being a Manchester United player? And also, one of the hidden costs of this Man United tax is, what does it do to the footballer? Because Bruno Fernandez might be sitting at home, somewhere in Lisbon, thinking, I don't think I'm worth that. And so what he arrives in, and he is a good player, by the way. I mean, in fact, people listening, go and have a look at his goals. That's a pretty good idea of what he is for once. But he's thinking, right, so I'm coming into a situation where I go into a dysfunctional side, which has all sorts of issues, which we discussed before. I've got a £60 million valuation on my head. I'm playing in a country where I have no experience of the football.
The team is no longer going to be built around me.
Right. Also, I would say for any creative type, I've got a big issue with what Man United are from an attacking sense. Like, you're talking about a team that operate almost solely on the counter-attack at the moment. Anything saying to someone, right, you go and give us £60 million worth of value right away. Because
incidentally, if you're talking about him as his goals as well, then going to a league where he is inevitably going to have less time and space to shoot, he's going to score less goals.
Yeah. Also, a side that plays off the back foot. Like, if you're playing for Manchester City, it's good to be Kevin De Bruyne. If you're playing in a team that's not quite as strong and doesn't enjoy that much possession or that much quality of possession, it's different. And so I think it's kind of a vicious cycle, really. I don't think I would do it. I don't think I would pay £60 million for. I remember thinking I was quite glad Tottenham didn't pay less money for him in the summer, because that deal was predicated on Christian Eriksen leaving first. And you think, for that kind of money, you can look at a more complete type. And on Dembele, who I know is injured at the moment, but is still hopefully going to be a very good player over the years to come.
Okay, well, that was a sort of Sejan. I think we needed to have that conversation, because this is going to come up again. How much do you have to pay for a player? We've had Robin Koch, your first central defender. Who's your second central defender?
No, I didn't have a second.
Oh, you didn't have a second.
It's a supplementary position. No, I'm not reshaping the department. I just wanted to add him in because I liked him.
Okay, Robin Koch.
Freiburg, he's 23. So I've got a bit of an overarching philosophy with all my picks. We had a little bit of a guess at what we think Manchester United's model is for recruitment. So there is one, but I've kind of I've firmed it up a little bit. So I'm looking at players who are no older than 23.
Yes.
I want footballers who haven't achieved, who aren't former Champions League winners, because I think that's been one of the areas in which United have fallen down in the past. Also,
Solskjaer clearly wants them to grow into something together, right?
Exactly.
That's his whole obsession.
Which is my next pick. So I've got few egos. That's very, very important to me, because I don't think Manchester United are built to sustain superstar players at the moment. Just because, for instance, the Paul Pogba problem is not necessarily to do with Paul Pogba. It's Paul Pogba belongs in a certain strata of the game, and Manchester United currently aren't there. And so you have this disconnect between what the player thinks he can achieve and what he actually does.
And they got to drop that history shit. I mean, Liverpool
agree.
didn't do that for years and years. And if you want to learn from an example, learn from what Klopp did at Liverpool, right?
Absolutely.
Giving Ollie loads of shit for saying that Manchester City treated us with respect by playing their first team. You are not European Cup winning Manchester United anymore. No. Forget it and just start afresh.
To move on.
You are the underdogs now.
You have
play
to
like
move
the
on.
underdogs.
I feel like the sort of admitting that is like an addict in recovery. I think stage one is kind of accepting some things, and moving on from a point of not quite ground zero, but a sort of a rock bottom of sorts. I feel like maybe they've hit that already and they're bouncing up a little bit. I feel like the summer's transfer policy reflected that a bit.
It did, and that's another thing we should say is actually the last 3 players they bought, Wan-Bissaka, Maguire, and Daniel James, have all been, as Alex says in this video, have all been pretty much successes as far as this season goes. They can play better or worse, but that's
relative to what came before. Absolutely,
and also it seems to be a more clear direction.
Yeah,
Solskjaer seems to have more control. Or at least his purchases are more reflective of him than they have been under previous coaches, with the exception of Mourinho, Matic sort of stuff.
So I feel like we're trying to mirror that. And as you alluded to, I want to buy similar aged players because I like the idea of having units within teams who mature together. I think that's really, really, really important.
Yeah.
I don't just want to find a guy from over here who's 28, someone who's 27, and just bang them into these slots. I don't think that quite works because also, like you just said, I think Man United are in a phase of rebuilding which is not going to be corrected over 1 year or even 2. It's a 5-year project, in my opinion. So midfield's interesting. I've got, I'll just go through them. So my problem with their midfield is it doesn't have an identity, it doesn't have a profile. What you see from United generally in games, I mean, against Liverpool, which is excusable, but generally in that calibre of game, the midfield doesn't exert anything on the match.
It doesn't have a job.
It doesn't have a job. It kind of collapses behind the ball or supports the play. It is not something that you don't think... When was the last time anyone had an opinion, like a solid opinion on how Man United midfield performed? It's just a group of players. And
individuals occasionally. Fred against Liverpool, McTominay's been good this season, but you would think that both of those players would be excellent substitution options, right?
Yeah, absolutely. In a healthy environment, they should be. So my first choice is Borussia Mönchengladbach's Dennis Zakaria. 23, as most of these guys are going to be, at home in a 4-2-3-1. He's rather lazily compared to Patrick Vieira. Which, let's not beat around the bush. We know exactly why that is. Because he's quite tall and he's black.
Okay.
And that's what happens to players of that profile who play midfield. And that's, I find that quite insulting actually, because it ignores so much of what he's good at. For instance, dislikable man though he is, Lothar Matthäus actually compared him to Toni Kroos, which I can kind of understand. I don't completely agree with, but that illustrates his passing ability. Okay. So what you've got in Zakaria is the size, 6'1", 2, 3, something along those lines. He's a big guy, but someone who's loaded with technique too. He's a little bit inexperienced, as you expect from a 23-year-old. I probably cost somewhere in the region of sort of 40, 50 million pounds, something of that, but worth the investment because you look at him and you think you do so many things well. So for instance, at the moment, Man United are in this situation where like every pick they have in the midfield. So if you think, right, well, we're going to start Nemanja Matic, and that's because you want one thing to happen. You want a little bit of a ball winner. With someone like Zakaria, you put him at the base of your midfield and you have the security he offers, but you also have a route out of your own half because he's that good with the ball at his feet. It's really important. Also, like, he brings other things. He's good in the air, so that's always nice for defending set pieces, attacking set pieces. But
which United, I think, are worst at in the league.
Which United are really not very good at, which is strange.
I saw the stats against the Liverpool game. I think they were
worst in the league.
Joint with Norwich.
As of Virgil van Dijk's goal yesterday. Or on Sunday, sorry.
Yeah, that's bad.
So that's a problem. But I couldn't think of, within reason, of a better place to start than him. In fact, if I only had £50 million as a Man United and I got to sign one player, probably him.
Right.
Just because I think...
And he fits in a double pivot.
He does indeed.
Who's the player he plays alongside at Borussia Dortment? Do you remember?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. I mean,
That'd be interesting to see.
Also, Gladbach, I'm a little bit skeptical of any team that performs well in any of these major leagues. So Gladbach, I think, I want to say they're currently second.
They were first for a while, weren't they?
They were first, but they've been overtaken by Leipzig. Hang on.
Yeah, actually, I think we looked at this last week. And
Sorry, they dropped to third after Bayern Munich won yesterday. So my problem would be that teams like that tend to get picked apart at season's end. Like you're already hearing, for instance, with Leipzig, Timo Werner might move to Chelsea in this current transfer window, maybe in the summer. So that's a habit of those leagues. So you don't really want to you can't sit in this situation and wait to see how he develops, because his next move is going to be to a Champions League contender.
He plays next to Christoph Kramer, by the way, who is described as a defensive midfielder.
Knocked out in the 2014 World Cup final.
Right, there you go.
See, I always thought Christoph Kramer would be a centre half.
Maybe, well, I guess he's graduated up north slightly. But that's interesting, because Man United only seem to have players who don't really progress the ball forwards a great deal. So maybe Zakaria would be at home next to a McTominay or next to a Fred.
I also feel, Joe, like the age of the strictly holding midfielder that doesn't do anything other than that is just a screen. I think that's over.
Yeah.
Like you see players like Luka Modric playing deep, Toni Kroos playing deep, even Sergio Busquets, like as far back as his start in the Barcelona side. Yeah. Good defensive player, but Busquets' best attribute always was his ability to play forward.
Well, Fernandinho is a perfect example of now.
Fernandinho is another great example. N'Golo Kante. Mm-hmm. These are all the players that can go forward. You don't have the Makelele anymore. You don't have Nemanja Matic was quite a mobile player. He's not now. He's very static, and you can't have that player. Just doesn't. No. You can't, unless you want to be a team that just defends. Yeah. Then you have to be able to. That player has to be the starting point of your attack. Always.
It's a bit like in the NBA, how every team now has to have a center, which is the tallest player, who normally is the player who stands under the hoop and has the ball passed and just places it in. Yeah. Now they have to be able to play basketball as well, because all the opposition teams have that player, and if you don't, then it's basically like having half a man down.
So you can't just have the 8 foot tall guy that catches it and puts it in the basket.
No, the 8 foot tall guy has to be able to. He's got to have skills.
He has to have the hand-eye coordination to go with it.
He's got to have handles.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, see, now I understand that. I heard that on. I was watching some NBA over the weekend actually. It was NBA programming on Sky, and I heard that, and I didn't.
There's a lot of weird stuff. There's one I don't realize.
Phrases that
English. When you put a little bit of English on it.
What does that mean?
I don't know. I think it's when you spin it a bit. I can't remember.
Tell you what, between now and next week's podcast, we'll find out.
We'll find out what putting a little bit of English on it means.
And we'll start dropping these NBA-isms into our...
I'm just thinking of mustard. I love mustard. Yeah. Right. Dennis Zakaria. I like Dennis Zakaria.
I really do.
Who's next?
So I went for a more obvious option. So primarily because you hear Man United connected with a couple of players at the moment. One is Jack Grealish. The other is James Maddison. I think both of those are wrong. I think if you're going to go to Leicester, you go to Wilfred Ndidi. I think Leicester have suffered from fatigue lately, and so that's affected their performance. It's not a coincidence, however, that they have fallen through the floor at the same time that Ndidi has had to sit out for a couple of games. Mm-hmm. He's outstanding, like quite a similar profile to Zakaria actually, like skillful, good on the ball, 23, but an asset going forward as well. I think there'd be a little bit of a premium there, because anytime you buy from within the Premier League and also from a club that don't need to sell, which Leicester would not, you've got hefty fees. So Zakaria is probably your more economic option. But Ndidi, every time I see him in the stadium, I think he's just excellent. Great. Really, really good.
Okay.
I mean, because the difference between someone like Maddison, nice to watch, fun, does good things, shoots a lot, plays sort of artistic balls across the field, and he's a good player, but he's not an outstanding one, and he never will be. Like if you're Man United, you're looking at a level of player. If you want a player of Maddison's profile, you're kind of hoping that he grows into Kevin De Bruyne. Yeah, Maddison's never going to be Kevin De Bruyne. He's not even close to being that. He's a good standard English player who will have probably 20, 30 caps to the national team by the end of his career. Ndidi, different position, of course, but completely different kettle of fish. like as a caliber player, is absolutely outstanding.
Right.
So yeah.
I hadn't heard that take before. Interesting.
What, Madison?
No, the Ndidi over Madison as an option.
Definitely. Like Madison doesn't really allow you to do anything new. Like he's nice. People would like him. He's a fun guy. He's got a bit of charisma about him, and he does fun things with the ball at his feet. Terrific. But does he make you really a much, much better team? No, I not unless you've. I mean, what Leicester are hinges on Ndidi far more than it does Madison, in my opinion.
Okay. So these are both players who would feature in the double pivot. Do we have more in this? In this area?
So I've got someone that goes alongside them, who's a different profile. Again, would play as within the double pivot. It's I hope I say this right. Tian Koopmeiners. He plays for AZ Alkmaar in the Eredivisie. Alkmaar hit a bit of a slump, but they've had an excellent season so far. I think they lost at the weekend, but they're a really, really talented team. I've got another player that's coming up from them as well. Koopmeiners, don't be fooled by his goal statistics. He's a penalty taker and a free kick taker. So that makes him seem like a slightly different player than he really is.
Useful assets, though.
Useful asset. Again, he's a big guy, 6'2", and that's not a coincidence. I want players that are tall and sturdy. Like, I know that physicality isn't everything, in deep midfield, but it's important. I look at Man United and
if your forwards are going to be sort of short and fast,
I think you need to compensate elsewhere.
Yeah.
So that's what I've tried to do. Koopmeiners, I would say he's 2-footed. He's generally described as a left-footed player, but he's pretty good off both feet. Really good passer of the ball. And again, this is what I'm focusing on. I want access points out of my midfield. And also players, equally important, players who are really good at receiving the ball off centre halves or fullbacks. Because it's fine if you're a deep line midfielder in 10 yards of space, well, most people can pick a pass. Yeah. What I need is a player that can receive the ball under pressure from a press and then turn out, play a ball up the field. That's really important. And Eredivisie is a little bit hit and miss, as we know. The examples prove that in the past. But really good player. Looks like he could be a really, really good player.
Okay.
And also fits into our age group thing. So I want someone that isn't a finished product. I want someone that buys into, I want to play for Man United.
Also that buys into Solskjaer, right?
Buys into Solskjaer. Like the young players of Man United, whatever you say about Solskjaer, young players seem to react to him.
They play for him.
They like playing for him. Look at Brandon Williams. We'll talk about him later, but they react better to him. So the older players don't. I do not want I don't want another Man United player coming through the door who's there because he knows Man United pay really good wages. Like if that player wants to come with the ambition of earning really good wages in the future, terrific. If you're worth it, because United have the ability to do that. You're not coming in just to pick up a check. You're coming in to be something, to grow into something together, and to restore the club. I want people that buy into that vision. I think it's really, really important. And so Koopmeiners, I feel like 20, maybe 25 million euros. Not a lot. I mean, I feel like it's a risk, but I think if you watch him, you can find Eredivisie games on British TV, actually. I'm not sure if you're watching abroad, but next time Alkmaar are on TV, give them a watch and look out for him.
What television channel are they on?
So they used to be on Premier TV.
Right.
And they sort of seem to fluctuate now.
What is Premier TV?
They carry, they're the ones that carry the new La Liga channel.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Premier Sports, sorry.
Sorry, yeah, I'm with you.
So we here, we have the benefit of Y Scout. So we can download the full games and it's great. But if you're looking for a TV channel in another country, I'm not sure what...
it'll be available.
Yeah, so for a long time, the Eredivisie was actually on Sky Sports, and then it changed when they seemed to chop all of their Euro content.
Right.
But yeah, you can pick up the odd game.
Okay. Well, speaking of paying money for a footballer to join your football club, Ed Woodward. We're not going to talk about Ed Woodward. We're just going to reference a great piece written by Daniel Taylor on The Athletic by Ed Woodward. Not by Ed Woodward, about Ed Woodward, which reflected some of the points that we made in the last time we talked about him on a podcast a few months ago. What did you make of it?
Yeah, great. As with anything Danny Taylor writes, I think it's excellent. He's one of my favourite writers. Not just saying that he was before he moved to The Athletic. I think he's great. But I found myself nodding through it. I read it on the train up here this morning, and yeah, I mean, I won't prejudice people against it. Just read it. I think it it points the finger away from Solskjaer, which I think is really important at the moment. Is the problems at Man United are not with their manager or even their players, or read the piece. I think is the way forward.
Okay,
don't just take my word for it.
The other thing to say is that the Athletic have released a bunch of new podcasts.
Have they?
This week? About 9, I think, something like that.
Goodness. Okay.
So we're covering all the Premier League clubs now.
So we're operating in a saturated market.
We're operating. Yeah, they're really saturated.
Anyway, yeah.
No.
So we just start swearing now.
No, it's good because these are sort of club specific, and Carl Anker and Laurie Whitwell and guests bring you a weekly show dedicated to Manchester United. It's called Talk of the Devils. I believe the first episode is going to be released this week, or might even be released today, Monday.
Okay, so be there for people if they're listening.
If they're listening now, it should already be released.
Okay.
That's freely available. You don't have to be an Athletic subscriber to listen to those podcasts. So do go and check them out, and you'll be able to hear good examples and conversations by many of their writers. If you do want to become a subscriber, you can get 50% off and a 7-day free trial by visiting theathletic.co.uk/Tifo. Please do that. It helps to support our podcast and the Tifo Football channel as well. So if you aren't opposed to spending £2.50 a month to read some fantastic football writing and help out your friends over here at Tifo in the meantime, do that. Thank you very much. Okay, more midfielders, please.
So I've got two sort of more gratuitous picks who don't quite fit the same... they don't fit in quite as well. I just like them as players.
Okay.
One is a player that's been connected with Man United before is Boubakary Soumaré.
He has been.
Lille.
Yeah, he has been.
Yeah, I still, again, I think I'm almost bringing this up at the fight against the Vieira thing. Like, because he's the new Paul Pogba, plays nothing like Paul Pogba at all. Like nothing like him. Like it's kind of, I heard him described as Pogba without the ego. I was like,
can I say this is not to suggest
Yaya
that there
Toure
is
used to get this.
Yaya Toure got this loads.
Yaya Toure is one of the most gifted players I've ever seen in the Premier League.
But he was a beast.
He was
air
a
quotes,
battering ram.
A battering beast ram.
Honestly, like...
Can I say not to forgive the racists because fuck them, right? But
absolutely.
when I watched Jack Grealish over the weekend, I thought, you look like David Beckham. And now I think you are David Beckham.
Well, that's kind of okay because although they don't play in every way, they carry themselves in quite... Like young Beckham, there are some straight lines to Grealish.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because it's like he's aware of what he looks like.
So not being appearancist.
No, I don't think so. If you said...
Basically, I thought if I gone back to the 90s, are you David Beckham? Are you going to marry one of Rich Mix or whatever they're called? Is it Rich Mix?
Little Mix.
Rich Mix is at art cinema, sorry. Oh, no, mate.
So the difference would be if you said, I think Jack Grealish should play right wing for England because he's really, really good at crossing in free kicks.
Yeah.
I would say, no, you're wrong.
You would point in my face like that.
I would do.
Very
because
aggressive.
it would be, you have lazily transplanted Beckham's attributes onto him because of physical appearance.
Well, that's what I'm doing.
And your own belief system.
That's what I'm doing.
Right. So I would say Soumaré, I actually, last time I saw him, he got sent off. So I can't remember who Lille were playing. I landed on a French League Cup game in the middle of, in midweek, about a week ago. And I can't remember who they were playing, but they had a one-man advantage for most of the game. And Soumaré managed to get himself sent off for a ridiculous second yellow card and even up, and they lost the game 1-0.
So sign that guy.
I can see why people want him. He's a good player. Reminds me a little bit of Zakaria in a way, like in the terms of like the way, in terms of how progressive he is with the ball. Like,
are you sure that's not just because they're both black?
I'm pretty sure it's not.
Okay, I'm just double checking because I don't want you to fall foul of your own expectations.
I think it's okay because they both fall foul of this prejudice.
Yes.
So they're in the same category. They're not identical players, but there are some similarities there.
Right.
Like Zakaria is definitely the better one at the moment.
Okay.
The other one is a guy that came up last week actually because I can't remember why, but in the sensible transfers with Brescia's Sandro Tonali.
He did come up in something.
He did. I forget why, but he did.
Yeah.
Most likely he will go to Juventus.
Okay. Don't they have 10 midfielders already?
Yeah, but they're all getting quite old.
Right.
So they do.
They've got Ramsey. Isn't Rabiot
Late
there?
20s.
No,
Rabiot's there, but Rabiot's there, but Rabiot's a bit of a problem. He's a little bit of a dickhead.
Okay.
Adrian Rabiot.
Right. Just a little bit.
Yes, he doesn't seem to be fitting in all that well. Good player.
Right.
But yeah, there are some
A lot of egos there, maybe.
just a lot of aging.
Yeah.
Like I think there's a problem anytime you play for a club that have dominated a league for any great length of time. There's a drop off.
The old lady,
although maybe not winning the league this season, maybe Inter Milan. We shall see. Tonali, actually completely different to every other player on this list in the sense that he's a technical player, purely a technical player. He's not a destroyer. He's a creator.
would he fit in the 10 role? Because that really needs replacing.
Theoretically, at Brescia, he plays deeper. He plays as the deepest midfielder.
Okay.
But then I don't know whether that's out of necessity because Brescia are shit.
Right.
They're just not very good.
So maybe that's why.
I think they're in the relegation zone in Serie A. So you can. My point would be, if you look at what Tonali is able to do, you could say, okay, maybe you're not a number 10, but you could be a kind of forward-thinking 8.
Right.
Because I don't really think the number 10 position exists in the way that it used to.
No,
I don't
although
in the Riquelme sense. You don't get that. Anymore.
They clearly are using that position at Manchester United. And most of the time they're playing the 43 role. One of my real frustrations with watching football is when players consistently make the wrong decision. Yeah. And I think he's a very technical player. He's technically accomplished, but Andres Pereira, oh my God, 50% of the time when it matters, he makes the wrong decision. And it frustrates me to watch it so much.
So a really good example yesterday of what you're talking about was the chance he created for Anthony Martial. Mm-hmm. That you think, I don't know how many touches Andres Pereira had during the game, but most of them were not very productive. There was one point at which he tackled Daniel James on the edge of his zone.
Yeah, seriously.
It's like a metaphor for what Man United are. They just come scything across, takes him out, ends the move. But then you can be seduced by someone like Pereira because you see like the feathery touch into Martial's path, which
the YouTube highlights reel is amazing. Yeah, presumably.
Like broken clocks though. Like there is no way he should be starting that kind of game.
But when Lingard is fit, it's Lingard who plays there. That's another player who, I think he's, as Alex says in the Sensible Transfers video, he's intelligent. He does have an ability to find space. He doesn't know what to do with it when he gets there, though.
And again, still talking about Pereira.
I'm talking about Lingard now. Okay. His decision making equally, it doesn't seem to have improved with his technical ability and. He's now, the joke about Lingard, and I've fallen foul of this before in this podcast, is that he's a young player.
He's
27, 28 years old. If Lingard is your first choice and Andreas Pereira is your second choice in that position, whether it's called the 10 or not, it has to be replaced.
Let's do away with the term. Let's just say if you've got a creative burden, you're putting creative burden on a player like Andreas Pereira, you got problems. Just
Pogba's gone, right? By the way,
I don't think he'll play for United again.
No, and also. Is that such a bad thing? The relationship seems to have soured, right? He clearly doesn't want to be here. Is that the case?
He very clearly doesn't want to play for Man United. I don't really blame him for that, and I don't necessarily blame Solskjaer for it either. I just think
it's not right. It's not the right fit anymore.
It was a lunge. It was give us a superstar and we'll be what we were. And you think superstar players have to be encased within an environment where you can control them, and he is. Hugely talented, he's young, he's wealthy, he's good looking. Like these things, like you need to be able to handle that. You cannot put a player like that in the middle of what is, I'm afraid, like a really average group of players and not expect some kind of reaction from either the player or his agent. And in fact, Man United got both. So I don't really, like the British press are vicious with Pogba. I feel pretty uncomfortable with the tone of the coverage, actually. Mm-hmm. I think it's, themes we've already discussed. But I think it's best for everyone if he goes. His career is he's moving towards his prime. He needs to be in a position to achieve. He needs to be, and
he also crucially he no longer fits the role that you in your temporary time as director of football set out.
Hour and 15 minutes. Yeah,
players that are maturing together that are at the same pace. Pogba is so much better.
He's the old guy.
Yeah,
like he's supposed to be the sort of the talisman and the role model and these are not the things he signed up for.
No.
Like Paul Pogba was given it's worth considering. Paul Pogba was sold something at Man United. He was, come here because we're going to do this.
We're going to build around you.
And his reaction and whatever people may think of the way he behaves, Man United are partly responsible for that.
Yeah.
Because they have not held up their side of the bargain. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying Pogba has behaved brilliantly or that he hasn't made bad PR decisions, but he is a young footballer who is not going to be perfect.
Yeah.
So I think that's just been a mistake from the beginning. It's a great shame because I was really looking forward to seeing Paul Pogba in this country.
Right.
I think he's really gifted. I really, really fun player.
Okay. So Tonali was your last midfielder. We've got 2 attacking players. Did you this is in the kind of right wing berth? Is it a player who might be able to play either side?
So at the moment, both of these players play from the right.
Okay.
They're both right-sided players with left foots, left feet.
Left foot. Left
they have
feet.
right feet too, but they are predominantly left-footed. Because I think so. What are United attacks? So you've got the players that we like at United. Rashford, currently injured. Martial, who I don't really like, but
Rashford, stunning season though, right?
given what we now know about the conditions around that, yeah.
Goodness me.
Like his recovery, some of his performances have been excellent.
There were some. I wouldn't qualify them as concerns, but last season there were some doubts about how he'd kicked on from his sort of grand opening, and this season, in the absence of anyone else to play in that position, with Lukaku left, he stepped up, right?
Big time.
That's a really good. That's very promising.
He's played through injury, he's so as of yesterday, it was reported by Henry Winter that he has a double stress fracture in his back, and he has had a bit of bone floating around his ankle, and he's been playing with those issues.
So they're talking about months. He's going to be out 3 months or something.
I don't think you'll see him. I think he'll miss Euro 2020.
Okay. The good thing to note though is that he's been playing on the left predominantly with Martial in the middle. He's been scoring from that position. So I guess if there was any last season any battle over which player was going to play in the 9 role, presumably it would be because of how many goals they would like to score. If Rashford knows he can score that many goals from the left position, there's no longer any real care who plays at the 9, right?
No, I don't think so. And also, I think that he's a far better wide forward than Martial.
Right.
Martial, if I'm honest, I find really disappointing.
Okay.
I think when he first turned up, you thought, goodness me, like you're looking at a new Thierry Henry with this guy, and just because of the way he played and the way he moved and the way he finished. So, it doesn't help. Of course, his first goal in English football was like the classic Henry far post side foot. But I don't see any improvement in him. I think he's good enough to stay at United and to be an asset, but it is what it is. I've factored Mason Greenwood into this conversation because I really like him. I think he's very gifted. I think
he might be the natural successor to Martial at the 9, right?
He may very well be. I don't know whether he's a centre forward or wide forward yet. I just haven't seen enough of him.
He's got those dead eyes though, hasn't he? The cold dead eyes.
It's just class. I like the way he carries himself. If you look back at we've had the privilege again of Y-Scout, you're able to go back into a player's youth career. Look at the way he carries himself in games. He struts. He is a player who has ultimate belief in his ability. He believes he's better than everybody else. It's important not to have too much of that, but enough of that is essential to being a Man United player, in my opinion.
And making the transition from youth to first team, right?
You can't just tiptoe onto a pitch, and especially not if that pitch is surrounded by Old Trafford. Like you have to have the balls for it. And Greenwood has that along with a huge amount of talent, and he's so exciting. Can't wait to see what he's going to become.
Okay.
So that's my kind of core. I like having players like Juan Mata around because he's a good professional. Like I know he's limited now and he's coming towards the end, but he'll never cause you a problem.
And his cross assist at Norwich was very good. He still can do that if he's given enough time and space.
As was his finishing against Wolves.
His dead ball situation is great as well.
Yeah, he remains a very gifted player. He's just not as mobile as he was, if he was ever particularly mobile. But
he's an old man.
Well, yeah, but the point is that some guys you want out of your football club. Some you think, well, you're a good pro. You're a good person. People like Juan Mata.
I imagine he's a very good influence for the young players.
Absolutely, right? There's your role model. Like this is the guy that you think he's never gonna go shouting to the press if you leave him out.
Yeah,
he's an asset, so he's fine. We'll leave him.
Do you remember in the early days of You Max It?
Yeah,
we used to make different sorts of videos. And Paul Ansorge of United Brand used to make these videos. I can't remember what they were called though. They were called the Premier League Puppets or something.
It was like
my favourite
house.
Yeah, Louis van Gaal's house, Wayne Rooney's house, something like that. And my favourite characters were Juan Mata and Ander Herrera, because Ander Herrera was like the young guy. All he wanted to do was talk about football, and Juan Mata was always trying to teach him about philosophy and art and taking him around museums. And he's like, "Come on, Ander, let's go look at the art."
In another world,
yeah,
Paul wins a BAFTA for that.
Oh man,
in another world,
yeah.
Like I love Paul Answich. He's one of my favorite people. He's a genuinely nice chap. That was one of the yeah.
Anyway, sorry, go on.
Anyway, but we should point out that is no longer available on the internet.
I don't know. I sent them to Paul. Maybe he's put them up somewhere.
Okay. Well, Paul has a new.
It clashed on the Tifo channel. It didn't quite make sense.
We could yeah. Anyway. So player one, I'm going back to RZ and I'm having a look at Calvin Stangs, who left-footed is kind of.
Calvin Stangs.
Calvin Stangs.
Okay.
Yeah, 21 years old. Already capped by Holland, I think. But why I like him is he's not just a mobile player. Like he's not especially quick. He's not a beat lots of players in the same move kind of attacking player. He is more of a playmaking type, albeit from a sort of a wider position. So imagine someone like Callum Hudson-Odoi, but without the pace, without the sort of the searing pace. So he's someone that can find a pass behind a defence or between a set of centre backs or in between the sort of centre half and a fullback. He's a distributor, lovely technique. Clearly got a really good mind for the game as well. Bit of a stumbling block. His agent's Mino Raiola.
That's quite a big stumbling block.
So I had to think about this because you and I talked about it in relation to Jesse Lingard late last week.
Yeah, can you tell? Because I didn't know about that.
So Jesse Lingard Jesse Lingard is now a client of Mino Raiola's. Within about a week of Mino Raiola publicly shaming Man United for their treatment of his clients.
Yeah.
Raioola's issue is that in the light of Erling Haaland moving to Borussia Dortmund, Manchester United seemed to let it be known that the reason they didn't sign him was because Mino Raiola had asked for too large a fee. Raiola contests that, and I mean, up to you whether you believe that. He contests it, and
it's hard to know who to believe in that sort of situation.
Yeah, I'm not sure I would believe either wholeheartedly.
Well, yeah, I mean, they've got form for saying, "Oh, we didn't want him anyway."
Yeah, it's a bit like never fancied her anyway. That
yeah.
So Raiola fired back by saying, like, Man United could ruin Maradona and Pele. Not known to understate Mino Raiola. So whether Jesse Lingard stays at the club, I don't know. However, I had a bit of a think about this over the weekend, and I thought to myself, God, how pretentious. Anyway, it's kind of, for Mino Raiola to not deal with Man United, it's kind of like cutting off his nose to spite his face.
Yeah.
Because if let's use the Calvin Stangs example. And there's nothing to connect with Man United, this is just theory, it's not rumour. If Man United want your client, and you say, no, I'd rather deal with Everton. You're not
sure,
you can't.
But if Man United want your client and you say, I'd rather deal with Juventus.
Different.
Well, is that not the case for most of these situations? I mean, considering the caliber of most of Mino Raiola's clients, right? Jesse Lingard aside, Haaland is the perfect example. If he doesn't go to United, he's going to Dortmund. It's not like he's dealing with Everton. He's dealing with other top European sides who don't ruin clients for him and who probably know the game. Don't try to be bolshy about it in public. Don't try and take on agents that they know that they can't take on. They see where the power dynamic is in this relationship. They try to keep people sweet. They try to play the game, right? Does that sound like what Mikhail Zorc does at Dortmund? It does, doesn't it? Does that sound like what Man United do? It doesn't, no. So
completely agree.
I sort of don't have any sympathy for them in this case.
I don't have any sympathy for them. What I'm saying is that I don't think it's a long-term position for Mino Raiola to take. You can't just say, right, well, I'm not going to broker deals to my clients, Man United, because that's not in his interest. Like you can say, right.
Depends who his clients are. Again, like think about the high caliber nature of his clients. How many of those people want to play for Manchester United?
Well, it's kind of like I looked at his client list yesterday. It's
not that big.
It's not that big, and it's also a bit of a spread between you have your top echelons, your Pogba, your Mkhitaryan's, players like that, and then you go
your up and comers.
Yeah, and also your not never words, but it's a bit meager. Yeah. So it's a spread of clients. But what I'm saying is that sort of you cannot. Initially, I thought, well, I can't have Stangs on this list because Raiola. But then I think, well, I don't know. Things can change, and I think there's sort of like things are cyclical in football. They always have been. Clubs fall out with agents. Clubs are in with agents. It's just the nature of the sport. So I don't want to rule it out for that reason.
Okay.
He's a good player. He's a gifted footballer. He's interesting because he is a contrast to the kind of Martial, Rashford technique. Also, let's not forget, in that right position, you've got someone like Daniel James, who I don't think is ever going to be an excellent player. He's a good one, maybe a very good one.
Yeah.
He's interesting. He does certain things really well. But I've got my pace.
Yeah.
I don't need more of it. I've got Stangs is not an immobile player. I'm not saying he's sort of Jan Molby.
Sure.
I just he's that is not his main attribute. His main attribute is his creativity and his mind, his technique. So I've got a nice contrast. I've got a nice 21-year-old player to sit in that position as well, who can be another option against a different type of defense. I like it.
Because Chong's doesn't look good enough, really, does he?
Who sorry?
Chong.
Well, I think he's leaving.
Okay.
Yeah. I think he's out of contract in summer and he'll be leaving.
Right.
That's my understanding. I think. I mean, I
don't know enough
if he's
about
not
Man
good enough.
United's youth teams either to know if there's anyone else. This is the other
Well, you probably got Angel Gomez.
thing. He's played a few games this season, hasn't he?
I don't think he's. I remember we had a conversation about this in the summer, and I remember thinking, he's about 5'5".
Yeah.
I don't want to be that guy, but until that's always going to be a red flag.
Yeah.
For a physical, it doesn't prohibit him from being a great success, someone like Spain or potentially Italy, maybe Portugal, but in a Premier League, how many 5'5" guys really break through?
Where's Houlihan?
I know where this is going. We're going to be Robbie Brady.
No, Robbie Brady is not a 5'5".
No, but that's your link. That's your segue.
No, I'm just saying.
It's where's Houlihan? And he used to play for Norwich, and of course, another great Norwich player of the past is. Every fucking podcast.
Listen, you brought Robbie Brady up. No. All I'm saying is Wes Houlihan is a very good example.
Wes Houlihan's a good player. Very
good player.
That I accept.
Do you know who else is a good player?
Tell me, Joe.
No, who's your next pick?
Okay, so I've gone to Dynamo
Sorry, that guy was called...
Calvin Stangs.
Calvin Stangs. I haven't heard of him. I'm going to look him up now.
Again, honestly, like I said before, if you get the chance to watch AZ Alkmaar on TV, do it. Mm-hmm. They're great fun.
I'll watch them.
They're great, really good fun. They're just you could add a couple of other players into this list as well, but they are worth a watch. So my second option, 22 from Dynamo Kiev, is Viktor Shankov.
Okay, Viktor Shankov.
Quite similar to Stangs. So I wanted a particular profile of player. I don't want pace. I don't want a winger.
Yeah.
I want someone that's happy coming inside.
An inside forward.
And I want a left foot.
Yeah.
Because Juan Mata is coming to the end, and I like left foot creativity.
Okay.
Shankov, I think the way to your best bet to try and see him is in the Europa League. The best way to describe him is actually, if people remember what a young, and I mean young, 5-6 years ago, young Andrei Yarmolenko looked like. So very left-footed, but happy taking players on, cutting in field, really good from set pieces, which is nice. But like Stangs, creative. So and he plays in that same with that same sort of upright position that Yarmolenko did, which I really liked. I wish Yarmolenko moved to Western Europe much earlier in his career, because I don't want to see him play at West Ham as he is. I wanted a 25-year-old Yarmolenko playing for Chelsea or Manchester United or Bayern Munich. Just what a player. So 22. Look, he there's a context problem. I mean, I don't watch a lot of Ukrainian football. I'm not going to pretend to. I not spend my Saturdays, watching illegal streams of Dynamo Kiev games. You watched him in snatches in the Europa League, and you also see, the Y-Scout précis of what he is, and sort of the odd phases that he takes part in. But as a profile player, he's kind of what United need, in the sense that he's what they don't have in that player coming off the right side, who can wander in field without doing what Pereira does, which is just get lost.
Yeah,
you get he's not
too
phased.
Far, right?
Yeah, right. He's not phased by pressure. Who isn't worried by, when he squares up a defender on the edge of the box, and there's a couple of other defenders supporting him, a centre back and a full back perhaps. He isn't phased by it, seemingly. I don't know if that will hold it through for the rest of his career. But he's interesting. And again, like everybody else on this list, this is not a player to say, right, well, he's our solution. He is a 20, 25, 30 million pound player that think, I'm going to take a risk on someone that could be something. So it's kind of like Memphis Depay. Like Memphis Depay could have been an excellent Man United player. There's a really famous anecdote about him where he was dropped to the reserves, and Wayne Rooney said to him, right, you know, I think Wayne Rooney was club captain at the time, and he said, you know, you get your head down, just work hard, and you know, just he had a little bit of a reputation for having an ego. So Wayne Rooney was not sure Wayne Rooney is quite the right guy to deal with that problem, but gave him sound advice. And why wouldn't you? He'd had 100 caps for England, you know, so fair enough. Apparently Memphis Depay turned up to a reserve game in his Ferrari and wearing a cowboy hat. And you just think, yeah, that's not going to work. Like, so you're looking for certain things, and one of them is maturity, and one of them is a lack of a reputation. So I kind of like these underneath guys. And Shankov does have a bit of a reputation as a good player. He's an up and comer. He's someone that I imagine within 6 months or so we'll be having all kinds of YouTube videos and you know, skills and assists. Welcome to Real Madrid, all that stuff. For now, like, he's not someone that would come into a club and people would be overly excited by, but he's interesting.
How do they break this then? I mean,
United.
I feel a bit tired of saying over and over again, director of football, and I'm not. You know, I had this conversation.
You have to have one. Like it's.
I agree.
So this is the situation at United. You have a. My own theory on the director of football situation is that United quite like not having a director of football because it prevents another layer of scrutiny on their decision makers. So you bring in. Who your director of football is kind of incidental as long as they have the right qualifications. What actually matters is that you have someone that can oversee departments. So recruitment's one, but things like analytics and conditioning and you know, who is tracking the decline of older players? Who is it that's recommending that player X gets a new contract?
Yeah, I mean, is that Solskjaer?
I have no idea, and this is part of the problem. Like, there's a crack between Ed Woodward and Ole Solskjaer, and there's just a void in the middle. I have absolutely no idea what happens in that void. And for a club like Man United, that's ridiculous. I know who makes the decisions at Manchester City. I know who makes the decisions at Liverpool. Ditto Chelsea, although I'd argue their system is imperfect. But there is the beginning of one. You have Abramovich, you have Granevskaya, you have Lampard, and you have Petr Cech being groomed for this little role in between where he's not quite a director of football, but he's sort of being allowed to learn the role on the job. I think we did a video on that. Mm-hmm. So you can look that up if you want to learn more about that. But at United, it's a guy. Okay, so what is the difference between Ed Woodward making a footballing decision and me or you?
I think we would do a better job.
Well, maybe, but my argument is, what qualifications do we have for that? Like, it's like,
no, I agree.
It's, I know football. Well, do you? I mean, what is there to say that you do? Because you are a commercial person, and by all accounts, Ed Woodward was a really astute commercial.
Can I say what was really interesting about Daniel Taylor's article that we didn't talk about on our last podcast? Was he referenced something I'd never heard of about Ed Woodward before, which is that he's very likable, and that people seldom leave a meeting with him or leave their first meeting with him thinking that guy's a douchebag. They think that guy's pretty cool, and there are lots of reports of people being very impressed by how Ed Woodward puts in the hours and does the research, right? So is it possible that because of those things, he's managed to maintain this longer than he would have done if he were the sort of ego-driven, I can do that fucking finance geezer guy that the press sometimes makes him out to be? Because people think, well, I mean, actually, he's trying, he's researching, he's not this person that I thought he might have been. Is it possible that he's been able to be slightly more pervasive because of his character? Maybe.
I think the real reason why he's been allowed to be more pervasive is because
he's in charge.
Well, he's in charge, but he also suits the aims of the family who own the club.
Yeah.
See,
and this is the kind of not unspoken, but in this conversation at least, the elephant in the room, right?
Yeah, because I believe that if winning Premier League titles and Champions League titles was of paramount importance to the Glazer family, they would have the footballing department to achieve those aims. Whether they did or didn't is, up to the game itself and managers and players and,
What do you make of... In fact, when I went to Old Trafford a couple of weeks ago...
You saw the Norwich game, didn't you?
Yeah, I was with the Norwich fans, but we did hear people in the Stretford End singing an anti-Glazer song.
Yeah.
And then there were reports that for the following game...
I hadn't heard that. I mean, that's...
I think I just saw that on Twitter.
What I will say is that if that is true, and I don't know if it is, but if that is true, then that's not as unusual as people might think.
No.
Like Premier League clubs, my experience of... I've had a couple of instances where I've written faintly negative things about football clubs. So I read about one club's stadium once. A lot of very fair observations, which are still being made today. And I got a kind of a sort of, don't request any accreditation from us anytime soon sort of message. So this stuff happens. Like clubs are quite sensitive, and they're very PR savvy. So something like that doesn't really.
What's funny though is that in this case, just to pick, I know you don't mean this, but the language you just used was clubs are very sensitive, right? Mm-hmm. But in this case, who is the club? Because what we're talking about is a group of dedicated season ticket holders who are singing a song about something they care about.
Who've been there much longer than the people that own the club anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
Yet the club are the American multi-billionaire family and Ed Woodward, who is a financial businessman from London.
Yep.
I mean, how does that happen? That's insane, isn't it?
Yeah, I agree. But completely.
They're the club.
Yeah, but I wonder whether a lot of what Manchester United have done over the last couple of years is purely for the benefit of the headlines. So if you remember, I can't remember exactly when it was, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, you used to have, whenever Manchester United would be on a down cycle, form-wise, all of a sudden there'd be a story about Neymar or Gareth Bale or Cristiano Ronaldo coming back. And I'm not saying there wasn't the appetite to do that at Man United, but it just happens time and time again. It's like this superficial layer of bullshit that
keeping you hooked a little bit.
Everything seems to be about maintaining the image of the club, whereas
it's like a microtransaction mobile game. A little bit,
like, because the thing that would really nourish the image of the club is the club performing well. Now, football is an imperfect game, so you can't guarantee success. But at the same time, you can be admired for what you're trying to do. If Manchester United tomorrow announced, right, what we're doing is we are building a fully equipped footballing department. We're also renovating things like, apparently their medical department is utter shit as well. It hasn't been sort of, I don't know. That's what I've heard. I heard it on a podcast on the train up. But
the best player's broken his back.
So it's not a great sign, is it?
Yeah.
So we're gonna change the way that we recruit. We're gonna change the way. Here's the guy that's in charge of it. That's Joe Devine. Meet him. Here's a big profile of him on our website.
This is looking up.
Here are his skills. Here is his past record. Here is what he believes in. If you make the process transparent and you allow fans to understand what you're trying to achieve, they will generally buy into it as long as it's not nonsense.
And from an evil perspective, you could get away with way more stuff.
Absolutely. It's the ultimate diversion, isn't it?
Can
start doing that, you can start taking far more money out of the club if you really want to.
Can I make the point as well that at the time they were singing that song, the Manchester United fans, they were 4-0 up.
Against Norwich.
This wasn't a gripe against a bad game or bad performance. Maybe you could make the argument that in terms of a wider perspective, it still could be seen as that. But they weren't singing this at 0-0, 1-0, 2-0, 3-0. They were singing this at 4-0. This is not something that they are doing purely because the team aren't performing well. This is because they actually believe it. And because, frankly, it's true, right?
Yeah, in my eyes, I mean,
not the horrible grotty song. I can't remember the lyrics of it, but there was some inoffensive one.
Yeah,
there was an offensive one.
I know the one you mean. What I'll say is that I'm in my mid-30s, so at the time when I was growing up, Man United were the dominant force, and so Man United to young at school in the playground with my friends, me was the team that just used to shit over your team every weekend. It would be effortless. You'd just be swatted aside again and again and again. So I always thought when this point came, when Man United fell into decline, I would wake up laughing. And the decline has been so pathetic that it's not even funny for someone like me, who lives for Schadenfreude, because it's so ridiculous that I actually have sympathy, because if you look around, there are no excuses for Man United getting this wrong, because if you look around at what works other football clubs, in this country and in Europe, there is almost a template for success. There is no excuse for getting it wrong, especially when you have that much money behind you. Like, you just need to be sensible. You need to plan what you're doing. You need to have people in positions who are qualified to actually be there. And you need to, I know this isn't about Solskjaer, but you need to have a manager who isn't just there because he used to play for you.
Yeah.
Does anyone believe that, like, if he had applied for the job when Mourinho left, and his, on the basis of his CV, which is relegated Cardiff and a couple of titles with Mould, and if Man United wasn't on there as if he didn't have this kind of emotional connection to the club, does anyone believe that CV would have just gone anywhere but the bin?
Sure.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
You could say that his time spent managing the Manchester United youth team meant that he knew quite a lot of the players, but you're absolutely right.
But in the same way that I understand that, but in the same way, when Brendan Rodgers left Liverpool, they didn't just give a job to Steven Gerrard. He went, to learn to manage properly. Off he's gone to Rangers first, and he's been successful.
Can I also say though that when Brendan Rodgers left Liverpool, Steven Gerrard was still playing football.
Was he really?
Yes.
I think, didn't he retire that summer?
Did he?
I want to say he retired at the end of.
Also,
you might be right.
Can I also say that Jurgen Klopp was available, and that when that's the truth in the world, that decision is much easier, isn't it?
I don't know how much sympathy I have for that, because when you have the resources for club at Man United, availability is kind of a vague concept, I think.
Is it?
I think so.
What? So you could just go and get Pep Guardiola or Jurgen Klopp?
No,
now?
with limitations. You could make smart decisions. You could have a run at a Simeone. You could have a look at a Max Allegri.
But are we really saying that like, there is a better coach? Put it this way, right? Yeah. Pep Guardiola and Jurgen Klopp, I would argue, are the two best football coaches in the world.
I'd agree.
There isn't anyone else currently on their level. But at the same time, they both play for Manchester United's direct rivals.
Okay, but at the same time, you got a situation where Mauricio Pochettino is kicking his heels in Argentina.
True.
Or actually, he's in England at the moment. He's actually literally in England at the moment, promoting the new La Liga TV channel.
Right.
And like it would break my heart a little bit to see Pochettino manage Manchester United. But goodness,
it would break his heart eventually as well.
Yeah.
It definitely would. He's not suited to it.
But like, okay, I don't believe Pochettino is on the same level as Klopp or Guardiola. But come on.
Yeah.
Like, guys took a club like Tottenham to the Champions League final. Like you can't. I know how it ended at Spurs, but if you look at his body of work, it's.
Come on, lads, it's Tottenham.
Exactly, and someone that can purge the kind of toxicity which is currently around Manchester United. Mm-hmm. Why are you not already? I mean, that phone call should have been made the minute he walked out of Tottenham. Yeah. In my opinion.
Do you know what they should do? They should go and get Edwin van der Sar from Ajax. They should bring him in to be the director of football because he's been in the club before. And then they should get Pochettino and make him the coach. And then they should spend £1 billion.
Well, good night. I mean, I like thinking Van der Sar a bit more of a finance guy at Ajax.
Whatever, I don't care.
He's not really
details.
The
details. We'll work it out later.
You want Overmars. If you want to do Ajax, you got to get Overmars.
That's the one I want. Okay. I want Overmars. Okay, you can have Overmars. But I want Van der Sar as well, just because. Come on, as far as footballing people go, Van der Sar is one of the top dogs out there.
Sure
Love that guy. Real great guy.
I think he's kind of like. I don't know precisely what he does, but my understanding is he's slightly more towards like not business development, but the economic side of whatever it is that Ajax do. But Overmars is the more of the traditional.
Get them both. In fact, just also get the kit because they've got a lovely kit. Yeah. We'll have the kit. Bring back some of the players.
The Amsterdam Arena. I mean, it's a lot.
Just
the best
move to Amsterdam.
The best sound in the whole of football is the ball striking the back of the net in the Amsterdam Arena.
Really? What does it sound like?
The clunk.
Try and do an impression.
No, I'm not going to do that.
Oh, go on, just try.
It's like it's slightly metallic.
Right.
So go on. Find any Ajax goal scored in the Amsterdam Arena. Yeah. That's a noise.
Nice.
Really
I like
good.
it.
So I think it's something to do with the way their microphones are positioned behind the goals.
We've talked for quite a lot longer than we normally would. There's so much to say. We did miss a couple of things out. I mean, I wanted to say I think Brandon Williams is good and exciting, and that's it. My other issue is that Wan-Bissaka can't really cross the ball very well, and if you wanted to have an inverting inside forward on the right in the right wide position, then someone's going to need to teach him how to cross the ball better.
I think it'll come.
Yeah,
I think he's
young.
What he can do is more important than what he can't at the moment.
Which is very impressive, isn't it?
Yeah, he's good.
Yeah. So change the whole midfield, and then that's 5%
You wanted a
of the
forward,
way.
didn't you? You were interested in a forward potentially.
I was. Maybe this is a quick. Oh God, are people still listening? 1 hour 20 minutes in.
Do it quickly. Do it.
Marcus Rashford. I mean, look. By the time this goes out, this is going to be the 21st of January. There's a week left. They were already talking about an on loan midfielder because presumably they don't want to commit themselves in January, which I understand. Obviously, the Bruno Fernandez thing is happening or not happening in the background. We don't know. Marcus Rashford is now probably, as you say, possibly out for the rest of the season, possibly even going to miss the Euros. Presumably, any chance of finishing in the top four, they need more goals from somewhere. Do they buy a striker? Do they loan a striker? I mean, they need a striker, don't they? Or do we just let Mason Greenwood play for the rest of the season in our role as in charge here?
I would phone for a short-term solution. I'd ask Real Madrid what's happening with Luka Jovic.
Right.
Because Karim Benzema is back fit. Jovic has really struggled in Spain. I don't know if he's available or not, but it's worth a conversation. Just maybe it's a loan with something. I don't know, but just yeah.
Yeah, why not?
I mean, or you do something really short term and sort of Edison Cavani it until the end of the season.
Right. Bring Ibrahimovic back on loan.
No. God, no. I cannot stand Zlatan Ibrahimovic, no.
All right. Well, look, that's something that I'm sure the other podcasts will work out. We've gone over here, haven't we? But thanks for listening. We'll be back next week. I think Alex is back. He's gone on a little holiday. I think he'll be back though, and we'll do a sensible transfers thing. We might try and squeeze some of the other big clubs in here as well. The Man United video is, I believe, the last one to be released. We are going to have a quick look, we were going to have a quick look at who should replace Valverde as Barcelona manager, but then the news overtook us. So you might see something on Quique Setien. I think we've done something on him already, but keep an eye out for that.
We've got Simon Harrison's video from a couple of years ago on his time at Betis.
Right.
Which is really good watch.
Really good, yeah. And also there's a very exciting video that we're going to be releasing in the next few weeks written by Nick Harris of Sporting Intelligence.
Really interesting video.
It's all about whether the Premier League should embrace the OTT streaming concept and do away with their own selling their rights to broadcasters, give the football directly to the fans. That's really interesting. So look out for that one too. Thanks very much for listening, and we'll see you again soon. Goodbye.